In order to effectively educate a learner, it is essential that the coach must first gain an understanding of said learner to help construct a session that suits them. In this context, to understand a learner, a coach must learn the intention of the athlete, their experience with the sport, the skill level they possess, and their goals they want to achieve. To begin, we need to know what makes a training session effective. The coach dictates how effective a training session can be. Therefore, it is their responsibility to ensure high quality. Firstly, the session must have clear objectives. The coach must work with the learner in order to establish well-defined goals that can be achieved by the end of the training session. This provides a direction for the learner and helps the coach to align the selected activities with the goal. It is essential that the coach's communication skills are at a high level, as clear instructions and impactful feedback are a key part in a coach's impact on their learner. Darden and Wilson believe that learners are to be provided with explicit and specialized instructions while also being supervised in order to assure effective learning. Similarly, an effective session is also shaped by the learner's ability to process and encode the information. Piazza et al. Notes that providing rationales lead to longer compliance with procedures and engagement, as well as the use of demonstrations, both correct and incorrect, enhances the effectiveness of the training. Conversing with the learner prior to the session provided me with greater understanding of the learner, as it was clear their main goal was to be able to competently dig a volleyball. The learner has had no prior experience with the sport and therefore was not confident in their ability to dig the volleyball. I proposed various aims that the learner can work towards within the session that the learner agreed with. We agreed that the learner will work to improve their confidence at digging the volleyball, develop their ability to complete the skill consistently, and ensure that the correct technique is used. Based on the goal, I constructed 3 activities along with objectives for each one that the learner was happy with. I then wrote out a structure for the session so that I was able to go into it prepared with a plan. I started my session with a warm-up to ensure the learner was physically ready and to reduce the risk of injury. I started with a light jog to get the blood to the legs and then went through various static and dynamic stretches with the learner. These stretches were for both upper and lower body, as digging a volleyball is a gross motor skill that requires movement from the whole body. After completing the warm-up, I demonstrated to the learner what a volleyball dig looks like by an expert. Due to my many years of experience with volleyball, I have a very proficient understanding of the skill, which certifies me to give a high-quality demonstration. The value of demonstration for the learner provides them with visual perception of motion and helps them to understand invariant patterns in movement, especially when the learner is at a pre-control skill level. I then recorded them attempting the movement skill before any learning in order to track progression. The first activity involved me teaching the learner the technique used to dig the volleyball. Because the learner is a beginner, I broke the skill down into smaller parts while constantly checking in to make sure they understood each part. The objective of this activity was to familiarize the learner with the digging technique. I explained the key aspects of the technique while showing them what it looks like. The key parts of the movement I wanted the learner to focus on were keeping their arms locked throughout the movement, ensuring that their wrists were joined at the volar surface symmetrically, they were making contact with the ball mid-forearm, and that they were generating the force to dig the ball through their leg drive and not through swinging their arms. Throughout this process, I gave them constant feedback to guide the learner in the direction of the objective while reinforcing positive behaviors. Once they felt comfortable with the different parts of the skill, I had the learner practice the movement as a whole repeatedly until they were able to perform the skill consistently without thought. Once the learner was familiarized with the movement, we then began the second activity. This activity involved the learner receiving the ball for them to dig back. The learner begins in the athletic position until I throw the ball to them. Once the ball is thrown, they position themselves to dig the ball back to me, and then set up again for the next throw. To ease the learner into this, I begin with easy throws that are soft and give the learner enough time to form the base of their dig. As their digging develops, I challenge them by increasing the difficulty of the throws by throwing to their sides and not throwing the ball as high. The objective of this activity was to be able to dig the ball in the direction of the target with the correct technique. Once again, I gave constant feedback throughout the activity to ensure the correct technique was used while correcting any negative behaviors. Now that the learner is comfortable with their ability to dig the ball, we can introduce them to an open environment. The final activity involves the learner engaging in a rally with another individual. The use of a second person introduces an element of unpredictability and forces the learner to react and apply the skill in a game context. The learner and coach dig the ball back and forth between them in a rally, trying to prevent the ball from landing. The objective of this activity is for the learner to be able to confidently dig the ball towards their target while maintaining the correct technique. Throughout the activity, various breaks are taken to allow the athlete to catch their breath so that their fatigue is not limiting their ability to complete the skill, while also giving me a chance to provide feedback to reinforce positive behaviors and correct errors to ensure they are on the right path to completing the objective. The reason these 3 activities were selected was due to the skill level of the learner. The activities broke the skill down into manageable steps that would introduce the different parts separately. I made sure that each activity increased in intensity and difficulty to ensure continual cognitive engagement while progressively developing the skill set of the learner. As the coach, I had to ensure that the objective and goals were met. There were many ways to assure this. Most importantly, the learner's digging ability continually improved. This was an indicator that the learner was completing the activities with an understanding of the purpose. By comparing the learner's digging at the end of the session to the start of the session, I would be able to see the differences side by side and observe their development. Feedback was also provided by the athlete, both verbally through the athlete communicating to me and through their non-verbal cues such as facial expressions and body language. By monitoring this, I was able to understand where they were at and how well they were able to complete the activity. Constant communication between the athlete and me helped to ensure that the learner understood what I was talking about and what was required in order to perform the skill. To conclude the training session, I took the learner through a brief cooldown to reduce muscle soreness and improve recovery. The cooldown involved a walk around the perimeter followed by static stretches of the lower and upper body. By completing this cooldown with the coach, it allows both the athlete and coach to debrief and discuss how the session went. I was able to discuss whether the aims and objectives were met, explain to the learner what they did well at and what they needed to improve on, and it gave the learner a chance to give me feedback on how my coaching was. My coaching philosophy was heavily influenced by the behaviorist coaching theory approach, in the sense that I shaped the learner's behaviors through regular reinforcement and feedback. A key part of learning a technical skill requires constant repetition as it allows the learner to gain tacit knowledge which helps to develop their muscle memory. The activities selected aim to repeat the movement skill to achieve these outcomes. Constant feedback allows me to reinforce good behaviors and correct bad ones to ensure athletes are learning and developing. Educators must discuss with the learner in order to understand their expectations. These expectations refer to how they expect the training session to go, as well as how they expect you, the educator, to behave. This helps to align the perspectives of both the educator and the learner so that they have a shared vision of the training session. As the educator, I made sure to gain a thorough understanding of the learner's needs by asking various key questions prior to the session, such as, what do you want to be able to achieve by the end of this training session? What do you feel confident in completing? And what experience do you have with this sport? This played a major part in shaping the training session, as it helped me to select the right activities that fit the capabilities of the athlete and their goals. I then had a conversation with the learner where we both communicated our expectations of each other. This then led us to discussing clearer objectives for the session. Ultimately, by adopting a behaviorist coaching approach, I was able to construct a complete training session that included relevant, impactful, and engaging activities that revolved around the athlete and their needs. Before developing the training session, I discussed with the learner to gain a thorough understanding of the athlete's goals, skill set, and experience to ensure the session fit them. I worked with the learner to agree on aims and objectives for them to work towards, while discussing our expectations for each other. Throughout the training session, I engaged with constant communication to ensure the learner had a clear understanding of the activities so that we were both on the same page. Through constant feedback, I was able to reinforce positive behaviors and correct negative ones to ensure the learner was able to achieve their objectives for each activity. It is evident that I was able to have a positive impact on the learner, as not only were all the aims and objectives achieved, their ability to dig the ball greatly improved by the end of the session.